Munsok, thank you for taking the time.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here.
You're the president and CEO of So Hospitality Group. You employ around 250 people in the St. Louis region, and you own a number of hospitality brands. Kimchi Guys, Drunken Fish, 612 North Event Space and Catering.
You know, I always tell people, like, when you have to do something and you want to do something, you have to be resourceful and figure things out, because no one's gonna tell you that there's some recipe to be able to be a good entrepreneur or be successful in life. I think there's a time period where, you know, I call it neck up or neck down work, you know?
Okay.
So, you know, I don't think you know any better when you're in your 20s and you're just working hard, you're just working with your body to make everything happen. You know, somewhere down the line, you start to go, you know what? I need to start using more neck up work so that you're not doing a lot of neck down work.
Munsok, thank you for taking the time.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here and nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You're the president and CEO of So Hospitality Group. You employ around 250 people in the St. Louis region, and you own a number of hospitality brands. Kimchi Guys, Drunken Fish, 612 North Event Space and Catering, and then a new concept you're working on, Miss Java, as well.
Yep.
Can you give us just a very brief, high-level overview of what each of those brands are?
Yeah, I think probably being in the area for over 20 years, Drunken Fish is probably the brand that have kind of put me on the map a little bit, and so I opened up the first restaurant in 2003. We currently have 3, and it's a sushi restaurant and bar. Kimchi Guys is a Korean fast casual restaurant where we specialize in Korean fried chicken. We have 3 locations here in St. Louis. And 612 North is an event space and catering where we do mostly weddings, corporate events, and that's been around for about 4.5 years now on the Landing in downtown St. Louis. And Miss Java is a coffee brand that we were supposed to open up that in 2020. Then COVID hit, obviously, and so we're on the verge of trying to get that going this year. So,
awesome! Thank you for expanding on that. So, I'm familiar with Drunken Fish and Kimchi Guys. I've never had the pleasure of going to 612, but I'm sure it's just as fabulous. With your restaurants, I'm sure you have a passion for food aside from business, and I'm sure in the beginning, and maybe even now, you were very involved in the concepts of the food, the preparation, things like that. When did your love of food and hospitality first get sparked, or can you trace it back to any particular moment in your life?
You know, as I reflect back, so now, I'm 51 years old, and as a young child, growing up watching television, I remember getting into a lot of cooking shows. Watching a lot of cooking shows, and my sister would complain about it. And so I think the love of, or the interest of cooking came very earlier on in my life. And then my mom was a really, really good home cook. And so just watching her around the kitchen, managing, prepping and cooking for the family. And I think all of that kind of started very early in my life. Yeah.
And you immigrated to the U.S. in the 80s, correct? How old were you around that time?
I was 6 years old in 1980, coming over to the United States, yeah.
And since then, been in St. Louis, right?
Been in St. Louis all my life, yeah.
After college, you came back to St. Louis, and
I went to college in St. Louis as well, St. Louis University.
Okay, so you literally never left. Got it.
Never left. This is my home now,
Yeah. And it's been your home for quite some time.
Absolutely, love St. Louis.
So growing up, did you have any exposure to entrepreneurship, or was it your first business after college that you were first exposed to entrepreneurship?
I think I got exposed to some level of rudimentary entrepreneurship when I was in college, throwing college parties.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my introduction to getting people together, assembling a team, promoting an event, making flyers, passing out flyers, and then running an event, collecting cover charges for a college party. And so that was my first taste of kind of mini entrepreneurship, when I was in college. And then obviously, right when I got out of college, I had an opportunity to buy over an existing business in Collinsville, Illinois, and I converted that into a nightclub called Club Kaboom. And a lot of the oldies in St. Louis probably heard of it a long time ago, but that's how I got started in business.
So where was this in Collinsville, one? Because I'm a little familiar with Collinsville. And then two, what was the business before you converted it to a nightclub?
So it's off of Highway 157 in Collinsville. And on that corner now, or that intersection now, used to be a Travelodge hotel. It was owned by an Indian family, the Patels, and now you go over there and it's like completely changed. I mean, there's a Walmart. The only thing that I saw recently was the Waffle House. I remember walking out of my business and seeing the Waffle House in the corner, and that still has survived, but everything else has changed around there. So, yeah, it was like a little rinky-dink hotel that used to be a lounge, a hotel lounge, and we ended up buying that business over the old owners and turned it into a nightclub.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the building's not there anymore?
No, it's all
Okay.
it's all out of there.
Okay. What was that process like? Like for someone who has you had a little bit of entrepreneurship experience, but no major business experience. Were you even thinking about risk or downside, or was it all just, I'm going to make this happen?
Oh yeah, I think when I felt like I knew enough to grab a group of people and move them into another room. That skill set of promoting and marketing and trying to create something for a nightlife or a high energy type of business. And so when I ran into that space, I'm like, it's like 4,400 square feet is perfect. We should be able to promote. There's a lot of colleges in the vicinity that we can kind of draw from. And so when we were talking to the old ownership, they wanted out. They weren't doing very well. And when I was visiting a friend of mine who lived in the area, we ended up going to that hotel lounge. And I'm like, man, there's like 3 people in this place. And the owner was behind the bar bartending. And we're like, hey, what are you trying to do here? And she's like, hey, I'm trying to get out of this business. Are you interested? I mean, that was like the first conversation. And being a poor college kid with a little bit of savings, I was like, I think we can do something. So I was thinking like, hey, keep the business, we'll help promote, and we'll take 50% of the door. And I wanted to kind of very low risk on my end. She still owns the business, and I can help promote the business there, and we can just split the door 50%, and she can have all of the bar. And she just wanted out. And so I was like, you know what? How do we make this happen? And so I ended up buying the place very cheaply and converting it very cheaply and opening it up. But I remember negotiating with her on that price to take over the business. And I would literally get outside my car and my hands would literally shake because I just was never in that situation, And you're talking about before that, you're studying for finals and studying, going into the life. But this deal I knew could either put me in a trajectory of success or put me down the path of failure, And just the thought, I've never had that feeling ever again after that. But boy, I remember just sitting in the car and my hands would just literally just shake like this. And it's that uneasy feeling of, am I doing the right thing? And obviously I took it over, and within half a year, we were having a successful business, And so it took a lot of grind work, getting the right people together. But nightclub is just all about promoting and getting the right people there. I remember, I still remember that feeling when I'm talking to you about it.
When you say within half a year you had a successful business, so within half a year you were profitable?
Yeah. I remember the rent. The rent was $1,750 a month. And so most of the business in nightclubs or bars really is your staff and the rent, and then obviously the expenses of the liquor. And we didn't serve any food. And so it was so if you had one good night, you were paying for the rent, and so it was a good. So the thing about nightclubs or bar business is that if you get people there, it's a very profitable business, It's when you can really struggle hard when you can't get the people there, So, but that's probably any business.
You eventually sold that business and you started Drunken Fish, correct?
Right, that's correct.
So why did you decide to move away from nightclubs and go more into food?
So I think there was during that time, this is, over 30 years ago, there was a lot of nightclubs in St. Louis. Now, I talked to some of my old nightclub friends, and there's no nightclubs or places to go. I mean, you're from out of town. Toronto, I'm sure, have a pretty vibrant night scene and a nightlife scene. But in St. Louis, it's really dissipated. And so, but back 30 years ago, yeah, there was a lot of, there's a lot of college bars, nightclubs, high energy places, lounges, people under 21 could go to, over 21 could. So there was a lot of choices. And we were just one of those things, But during that time, there was if you were in the nightclub business, you didn't want to do it for too long because there's another flavor around that's coming.
Makes sense.
And so, we were going in, 4.5 years, and I felt, man, we've done so well that if I'm ready to go out now, it's probably the right time to get out now and do something different, because you don't want to sell a business on the decline, And so at a very young age, I kind of realized, we're doing really good in sales. I said, this is probably the right time to get out and do something different. And, nightclub business it's a tough business because you're getting in there late and you're leaving very early. And so your schedule is really, really messed up, and so you're not leaving home until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And so I wanted a little bit of change of pace, and I thought I ran that business well, and I wanted to exit it well.
You said a couple of really interesting things there. So it's interesting that you said 4.5 years, roughly, give or take, because I was talking to someone the other day, and they told me if you're going in the hospitality space in St. Louis, and it's like a bar type of concept, you want to sell within 5 years.
Oh, somebody actually told you that?
Yeah, someone said that to me. So it's funny. It's funny that you said 4.5 years. That's really interesting.
I think the bar, high energy scene businesses, there's some novelty to that type of business. And I think if you can get past 5 years, that you're there's some places in St. Louis that have lasted a long time, but going past 5 years in a nightclub environment, that's unique. It's
Sure.
hard to find. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned there not being many options today in St. Louis. So whenever I have someone come visit from Toronto, they'll say to me, number one, there's nothing to do at night, and then number two, there's no food at night. And I don't mind because I'm a family man. I'm not really out late anyways.
Sure.
But do you have any idea as to why that is today? Why there's very few options versus 20 years ago?
I just had this conversation with a few buddies of mine that were in the business when I was in the business, and we're baffled by being we're not Chicago, New York, LA, but we're a pretty large city to not have those types of options, and so I'm baffled by it actually, and I feel like if somebody does it well in St. Louis today, it would hit off. But I'm an old man now, so I'm not in that life, and so, but I am baffled by it in St. Louis. Why we don't have enough choices for young adults to go hang out? It's weird.
Well, hopefully, if the right person's listening to this or watching this, they'll go in and start that concept that we need here.
Yeah, for sure.
So you went to Drunken Fish after that, or you started Drunken Fish.
Mm-hmm.
How did that idea come about? Were you already kind of working on that as you were in the nightclub business?
No, I wasn't. I think I was traveling a little bit around that time, and when I was visiting the East and West Coast, there was a lot of little sushi lounges that were popping up. And I was like, we don't have anything like that in St. Louis. And so this is like 2000, 2001. And so I decided, I think that would be something cool to have here in St. Louis. And I decided to kind of embark and start to kind of go through the process of opening up a loungy type place with a little bit of sushi on the side. That was my whole idea. And so when I was looking around, I really wanted to be in the West End. And so I started looking up places in the Central West End, and I couldn't find anything. If I did find something, it was too big, or if I liked the space, it was too expensive. And so I started looking into secondary markets that I thought could do okay as well. So I had a friend that did a happy hour in Westport, and I ran into an old bar and grill that went out of business called Wilbur and Gill's. And I started talking to the landlord, and I didn't have a whole lot of experience business-wise other than the nightclub business, and started negotiating with them about that possible space. And then we turned that deal. We opened up about 4 months afterwards. And that's really, I think, how the nightclub was one aspect of the business in terms of higher energy type of business. I wanted to bring a little bit of that with Drunken Fish. Not a nightclub, but a little bit higher energy and having some food to be able to offset that energy, And so when we opened up, I really thought the split would be closer to 70-30, meaning we'll do 70% liquor or bar sales and do about 30% food sales. So that was hey, we'll do that. And I think that's a good balance between the two types of business that we're going to have in Drunken Fish. But right away, we were doing 50-50. We're doing 50% bar and 50% food. And I was like, man, there's a huge opportunity for people who are actually looking for that style of food at the time. Because in St. Louis, when I opened up in 2003, there was literally like 4 places to get sushi. And most of those places were like very traditional style of sushi. And so we were, at the time, very modern. And I don't think people kind of understood our brand at the time. And when we opened up, we were pretty popular, And so I felt really good about the new brand coming into St. Louis and doing something kind of different.
I know your hands weren't shaking there, but did you have like any mentor that was helping guide you, or was it still you figuring it out as you go and just learning on the fly?
I think no, I didn't have a mentor, but I always tell people, like, when you have to do something and you want to do something, you have to be resourceful and figure things out, because no one's going to tell you that there's some recipe to be able to be a good entrepreneur or be successful in life. And so I know more of that now, being in the game for such a long time. But at the time, it was just all about, I can outwork anybody, if I have to wake up at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever the time frame to be able to get stuff done. It was just my mentality, and we're just grinding it out. And so I think one of the main things about entrepreneurship is, can you outwork anybody else? And do you have the discipline to be able to outwork anybody else? And are you willing and able to figure out problems and come to real solutions? And are you be able to do that with a group of people that you're going to be able to surround yourself with? And I think those are the most important skill sets that at the time, you don't know you're building and learning these things, but in retrospect, those are things that I think are remedies, are tools to help you become more successful.
I would fully agree with that, but I would be curious to hear from you when you made the switch from just working hard to maybe being able to be a little more strategic as well. Because in my opinion, I think you have to do exactly what you're saying from like 0 to a certain number. But then at some point as a leader, you probably have to make a switch to where
Absolutely.
you're not just, working hard 24/7.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree with that. I think there's a time period where, I call it neck up or neck down work, And so, I don't think you know any better when you're in your 20s and you're just working hard, you're just working with your body to make everything happen. Somewhere down the line, you start to go, you know what? I need to start using more neck up work and utilizing how to be more strategic and tactful in your strategies so that you're not doing a lot of neck down work, And so I think in the first year, because I was in my restaurant, making schedules, ordering products, putting new menus up, training people. Sometimes I might have to wash the dishes. So you're doing all of these things, and then you realize, hey, I'm only one person. How do I mitigate some of these duties and start delegating things down so that I can do more higher up work? And so I think within the first 6 months of the business, I started realizing, hey, I need to start training some of these processes down, and so that I can work on things that I think are more important to building business. And I think once you realize that work is very, very important, I started putting some systems in. So I started working. So I would work a full day at the restaurant. I would come home and start writing protocols, SOPs, training manuals, handbooks. And so that took several years to set up, actually. And so I always tell people, like younger entrepreneurs, when they ask me questions about certain things, I go, anybody can run a good business, but do you want to run that business 20 years from now doing exactly the same thing? Or do you want to be able to scale or have an opportunity to scale and work on different things and delegate those kind of responsibilities down? Because if you're in the business, then you're really not an entrepreneur. I always, I had a young friend of mine that got into business, and I said, don't scale your business unless you're fully out of your own for your first business, because it's really, really hard to expand. Because then if something happens in your first business and you get to your second business, now you got to be traveling, back and forth, putting out fires.
Right.
Yeah.
So the processes, SOPs, things like that, that's actually what we're working on. We were working on last year and this year.
Sure.
And it's, again, like you said, a multi-year thing.
Sure.
And it's when we were able to really step back and focus on, or when I was able to step back and focus on the business and think more strategically versus just go, go, go.
Yeah.
And I love the way you put it, neck up and neck down. I've never heard that before. And it's really the difference between, like, let's say your local pizza shop and a Domino's. If you decide you want one or the other, it's not a right or wrong answer, but it's two very different lifestyles, two very different sets of skills that you have to develop.
Absolutely.
When did you get to the second location then of Drunken Fish? Or did
we opened up Drunken Fish in May of 2003. And then we opened up Drunken Fish Central West End in May of 2004. So within a year, we opened up 2 stores. And I think you learn a lot. And one of the things that I didn't know at the time was, if I open up a second store 15 minutes away, am I really taking half of my business over to the other location? And that really scared me. But I think once we opened up, I answered that question and said, no, you're gonna build a market around that store. And in terms of the density of population and proximity of that location, you're going to draw upon its own market. At the time, as a young entrepreneur, I was just a little apprehensive about, man, am I going to take some of the customers that we built here in Westport in the first year and then now send them over to another location? It doesn't really do anything in terms of your, overall, value. And so that was what I was a little concerned about opening up the second store. But I would say people might think that might be an ambitious move within the first year. But we were able to manage it because I think you can get to 2 stores if there was something wrong. If thinking back, would I do that again? Probably not. I think you would want to create infrastructure around your business first, because a lot of things could have gone wrong, and it didn't, luckily, And luck has a lot to do with your success as well. You could time things. You might have a really good person on your team. And so I think I was very fortunate and lucky, doing the right things in the right time frame, being surrounded by some really good people that helped me throughout this journey.
And you don't have any partners in the business, correct?
I don't.
It's just yourself?
Yep, just myself.
So when you say you came across like good folks, are you referring more so to team members, vendors, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I still have some employees that started with me from the get-go and has been with me for a very, very long time. And I'm very thankful for some of the people that have been with me, some of them for over 15 years. So
wow, yeah, I think that speaks very highly of your organization. 15 years today is a long time.
Exactly. It goes fast though. Time goes by fast. Yeah.
Sure. And in the hospitality world in particular, there's a lot of turnover, right?
Absolutely. And I think hospitality, generally speaking, is a very, very hard business. And so I respect a lot of people that are in this game or in this sector because. Yeah, it's a hard, tough, grinded out business. And people that make it for over 10 years, it's very rare to see, in this business. And so, I feel lucky that I was surrounded by some really, really good people,
Fully agree. High rate of failure in the hospitality world. And yet you kept going.
Yeah.
And you kept expanding and starting new brands. So can you take us through how or why you decided to expand beyond Drunken Fish and you brought all these other brands under your umbrella?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons for really Kimchi Guys and 612 North to come out was in 2015 we have suffered a minor accident in the building that I own downtown, and I came back from an early lunch to find out that a portion of my building collapsed, and which caused us to close down Drunken. Drunken Fish on the Landing was open for 10 years at the time, doing very, very well. And when that collapse happened, we had to immediately abandon the building, and we couldn't operate anymore. And so we closed down Drunken Fish. We had to close the corporate office and relocate. And what I thought was going to take maybe 3, 4, 5 months to reopen took 2 years, going through the insurance claim and going through all that process. And during that process, I had some time to reflect with my team. And in that discussion, we're like, hey, we could open up Drunken Fish again, and that would be the easiest move. But if we had to do something differently, think outside the box, what would be the best brands if we can start from scratch? And so we felt at the time, fast casual businesses were up and coming. A lot of people were talking about those types of eateries that are getting more popular around the country. And so we decided at the time to explore options of that. And Kimchi Guys, a fast casual Korean fried chicken restaurant, came about. And because we didn't use one of the spaces of the building on the 5th floor with amazing views of the river, downtown, and the arch grounds, we decided to do that as well at the same time. And so we just really took that time to kind of reflect what brands would make most sense if we were to reopen in this building, and we came up with 2 different brands.
Today, Kimchi Guys has 3 locations. Is that
3
right?
locations, yep.
Any plans to expand beyond 3 at this time?
I think so, yeah. I think that's our goal. And so we have one on the Landing, we have one at Washington University, and then we have one in Edwardsville, Illinois. And we're planning on doing more of those stores. Yeah.
And of your 4 concepts, one of which you're working on, I think Kimchi Guys would be the easiest to franchise out if you ever wanted to. Is that in the works at all?
We get a lot of requests for that. I think if it makes sense, we would do that. Yeah, we would do that.
And then I'm sure that'll allow you to grow within the Midwest and perhaps nationally at some point. Yep. I think it's a great concept and one that would really do well in a lot of markets.
It's definitely scalable. We got it. I mean, the recipes we have down the line, easy to operate. You don't have any front of house staff. Small architecture in terms of operationally, good margins. And Asian foods generally are on the rise. And so I feel like it's a really good concept to expand and scale.
If you were to look to franchise it out, would there be any existing franchise that you try to model that after in terms of just the approach you take for the growth? For me, something that would come to mind is Wingstop. It's not, of course, not the same product, but Wingstop corporate treats their franchisees very well. Mm-hmm. They're very methodical about where they go and their real estate footprint, like you mentioned.
Sure.
Do you have any concept that you looked at?
Only thing I can reflect on is if I had to do it over again, would I create my own brands or would I buy a franchise? I mean, somebody recently asked me that question. And I said, I unequivocally, I think if knowing what I know now, I would buy a franchise for sure. Because most of the work that you're buying is on the infrastructure of that business and a good brand's name, obviously. But if you feel like you got a good brand name and you don't have to work on the infrastructure, boy, I would go down that. I would gladly give away 10% of my revenue to know that all of those things are set up already. Because most of the work, the headaches, the challenges around my businesses were creating that infrastructure with a group of people, not just me, like a slew of people in our corporate office working on documents, working on SOPs, manuals, training documents. That's the hardest work, in my opinion.
Would it be fair to say you're more of like a creative person versus necessarily someone that wants to be in the weeds, creating SOPs and stuff like that?
I think, I think when you're an entrepreneur, I think, you have strengths and weaknesses. I feel like I have a good balance of creativity side and running a business as well. But you got to sometimes kind of pick your poison and understand your limitations and surround yourself with people that can help you with your weaknesses, But there are definitely things that I have shortcomings on that I try to surround myself with people that can help in that regard, So, yeah.
Being an outside of the box thinker, for sure, I think, like, regardless of what your skill set is, you have to think outside of the box. And you showed that when you said you looked at the coasts and what they were doing, and then you brought that to the Midwest. Yep. I didn't catch it, but with Kimchi, guys, was that similar where you saw this type of concept working in the coasts and then you brought it to St. Louis?
I'm Korean, so, I've grown up eating Korean food all my life and love Korean food today. And Korean fried chicken is like so popular in Korea. It's like Starbucks in Seattle. You'll see it in every corner. And it wasn't really talked about, or there's none in this area for Korean fried chicken. There's few Korean restaurants, but not Korean fried chicken. So I want to bring a Korean fried chicken restaurant to St. Louis, So that's I've always had it in the back of my mind of doing something Korean or with Korean flavors, but it just wasn't the right timing in St. Louis. If I lived in Chicago or LA or New York, I think it'd be an easier decision. But nowadays, I think St. Louis culinarily has really moved the needle up. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the food scene here. I'm not in your world, but I am a consumer, and I enjoy going to different restaurants and dining around town. I think, in my opinion, like, if we're going just based on the population, St. Louis has a stronger food scene than a lot of cities, and Toronto has a lot of options. But for a city of its size,
Yeah.
I feel like it's almost no comparison to a St. Louis, given St. Louis is much smaller.
Absolutely, yeah.
With you being someone that's been around food hospitality your entire career, one thing that I have to ask you about and pick your brain on is how you think about hospitality. So there's someone told me this once. I don't remember which hotel it was, but there's a hotel brand that essentially says guest is like God, meaning like you're going to do whatever the guest desires or what they need from you. So do you have any mantras or philosophies that you follow yourself or that your company tries to follow when it comes to how you think about hospitality and your guests?
I think one of the things that we talk a lot in our company is delivering the wow, and I think, and equally in terms of not just customer base, but also the people that work for you. And I always feel like you gotta be able to take care of everyone that comes through the doors of your business. That's customers and your employees, And I know we talk about that so much, and why that's so important to building your brand. So that's probably one thing that we talk about religiously. I think we have kind of gotten away from it a little bit during COVID. COVID, I think, threw the monkey wrench in every business, because as you're kind of marching through, you're working through all of the challenges in building your business, and then boom, you're shutting down. We have taken, just for example, Drunken Fish. I mean, we took probably 50% of our menu off the menu during the first month of COVID, because we knew we had to cut our staff, but we also had to cut our operations in terms of logistically how to operate in the kitchen to mitigate harder dishes to make. So we were just trying to cut down on everything, and you do that so that your business can survive. And there's a lot of business that didn't survive through the COVID, but you make those things happen and you pivot in the right points so that you're at where I am today. And we're working on a new menu right now so that we're bringing back more modernized menu options for the market.
Appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I think would be really beneficial to know is, in the beginning, you're doing it all. Now you have a team. You're instilling the culture you want in the team. But with such a large team, what does your day-to-day look like? Because you just mentioned like you're reworking the menu. Are you personally working on that? Are you trying to delegate to team members, or what is your day-to-day in the business look
So
like?
right now, for myself, I'm never in the stores as much as I used to be. I was pretty much living in the stores when I first started. So we have a corporate team of probably about 12, 13 people, full-timers that from accounting to marketing to culinary. We have a wide range of people that some of them has come up the ranks, and they have obviously different responsibilities. But because one of the things that we're trying to get off the table in the first quarter of this year is the new menu, so we assembled a culinary team to be able to come up with new recipes. And so I'm heading that meeting. So I'm overseeing that culinary creative side. I'm also running the meetings for the district, and then everything else when it comes to store meetings, marketing meetings, accounting things, it's all delegated down to the team members.
Got it. That makes sense. As far as real estate decisions, I'm assuming that's primarily yourself. And I know you own a number of commercial buildings. So if you're looking at a new location, how are you kind of thinking about that? Are you thinking just in terms of demographics, or are you just looking for maybe a building you can own and control so you don't have the rent cost? Or how does that start?
I think for sure now, since I've been doing this for a long time, I definitely want to shift the gears of getting leases in a landlord space versus owning my property and paying down the mortgage of that property. So I think there's a little bit of a paradigm shift in terms of the way you think and strategize for long-term goals in your business plan that I didn't think about, 15, 20 years ago. And so, so I'm trying to acquire more real estate probably in the last 5 years, and I'm still looking for properties today. Yeah.
As a real estate guy, I got to ask this. So, and feel free to not answer if you don't want to. Does the depreciation play into that? The fact that, you're able to depreciate and offset some of the income coming from
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It's one avenue of investments where you can depreciate your property over time, and it definitely takes a good tax advantage. Yeah.
And I would imagine as well, like if you were to buy a retail center that has a few extra spaces that you can lease out, one of your concepts is a pretty strong tenant to have in place, and it may attract others, or probably will attract others.
Sure.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our recent project in Edwardsville, I was able to buy a 2-acre lot in a development that's growing, and I was able to purchase the lot, build a 10,000 square foot building, and I announced that I was going to be a tenant in that building. A lot of people know that I own that building, and so when we make the announcement that Drunken Fish and Kimchi Guys is going to open there, I think that's one of the reasons I think the developers decided to sell me the lot, because they knew if they're going to sell me the lot, I'm not going to put a farm there. So, so they sold me the lot. I announced that we're going to open there, and then we were able to get other St. Louis businesses to open over there. And now we got Sauce on the Side, High Point, AQ Nails, Clementines. These are all St. Louis brands that are coming into that development. And we got Nothing Bun Cakes and Bear and Brew, which are local concepts that are in my building now too. So I think all of those things help. And I think, when you're making a district or a neighborhood, or you want a good mixture of tenancy and businesses that can play along each other well. And that's how you can grow not just the retail business, but also the commercial side of that business for the long term.
And just for additional context, Edwardsville is a great town, but to see all these names in one retail center, you would have never expected it 2 years ago, let alone 10, 15 years ago. It's incredible to see.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like, and that project makes sense because, like I said, I mean, I ended up, you spend a lot of time going over the process of, putting up a building. But once everything is done, that mortgage is going to help you in the long run in terms of your business strategy. Is that, the rent that you're paying to yourself will ultimately pay down the loan and the note for the long haul.
Yeah, it's a great strategy, one that I think it would be wise for most restaurateurs to employ if they're able to. You know, it took you a number of years to get there, of course.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the city, you know, your passion is very obvious. The region as a whole, it's your home. It's where you've built your companies. You're invested in a neighborhood in downtown Laclede's Landing that has seen some ups and downs. People today may classify what you're doing there as risky. I'm sure you've heard that or something along those lines. What's your vision for the Landing, and why are you so passionate about wanting to reinvest in the city?
Well, I believe wholeheartedly about not just the Landing, but just revitalization of downtown St. Louis, because I've traveled enough, and people who traveled enough understand why downtown of their city needs to be vibrant, safe, with ample parking, and for people to be able to live and work in that area. And we are behind, in my opinion, of a lot of other cities. And so people like, not just myself, but other people have to invest and see the larger vision of downtown. And Landing is one area that I am in. I have 2 buildings there. And the Landing is exciting because I can say since I've owned my buildings, first one was in 2006, it's the most exciting time the Landing has seen. We have over 8 buildings that are being converted into residential. We have an entire building that's rented fully out called Peeper Lofts. My building, Greeley Lofts, have just opened up 2 floors, and we're fully rented out. And we're trying to finalize the 4th and the 5th floors right now. That's a 44-unit, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments. And the other buildings are being finalized in the first half of this year. So there's a lot of activation going on down on the Landing. We have a newly opened park that opened up on the Landing recently. And so there's a lot of exciting things going on. And being next to the river and a historical monument, the Gateway Arch, I feel like we're positioned really, really well for the growth of St. Louis downtown. Yeah.
I would fully agree with you there. So being from another city, I still, after 10 years, I still can't wrap my head around how many amenities there are downtown, cultural institutions, and yet no one's downtown. It doesn't make sense to me. And whenever I have folks visit from out of town, I give them a full tour of the region. I explain why things are the way they are, and then they love the region. But if they didn't have me, they would simply go downtown and think St. Louis is a ghost town, which the region isn't. Unfortunately, downtown kind of is today. So I'm glad folks like you are investing in downtown. I think it'll be a very successful project. I mean, if you go to the Landing, there's nothing like it. It's incredibly beautiful. The history, the location, the views of the river.
You go to any city, you have a neighborhood off the water near downtown. It's usually the best areas of their city.
Yeah.
And so it is a little mind-boggling that we haven't made that leap yet. But it's coming. It's coming. There's no reason why St. Louis downtown can't be thriving. We need to have leadership keep pushing the envelope in that direction. And we need to have real people investing into downtown St. Louis.
Right. And real people like yourself, Brian Mingus, who has some very impressive projects down there. Another piece just on that, which I was having this conversation just the other day. I don't think there's any city in the world, anywhere on the planet, where the metro area has at least 3 million people or close to it, and you can rent an apartment or buy a condo downtown. If you're renting $1,000 or buying a condo for like $100,000, $200,000, I don't think there's any other city in the world where you can do that downtown.
Absolutely, that's a true statement for sure.
It's insane.
It is insane. Yeah, it is insane. But I feel very, very optimistic of all of the positive changes that are happening down there. We just have to have more people buy into that vision. We have to have leadership of St. Louis also buy into that vision, and we need to slowly start chugging down that direction, you know.
And it sounds like we are with all the projects going on in the Landing. Do you think there's anything that the city administration needs to do to help out the efforts of folks on the Landing or anywhere else? Because I have heard from other people the crime issue, of course, and just wanting the city to be a little more proactive. Do you think there's anything the city could do to help at this
If
time?
the city could take more of a stance in the safety, I think it can accelerate the process.
Yeah.
And I think cleaning up the safety issues, the parking issues, I think could go a long, long way. And I think because perception is reality. When people feel like it's not as safe, you won't hang out in that area. And so I think it's one of the triggering points, actually.
Are you also excited about some of the work going on at Westport, since that's your original Drunken Fish location?
That's right. Yeah, you see all the development that's going on up there. I mean, right now it's a little bit of a hassle for my business there, but we know it's going to make that turn once all the construction is done. And so we're waiting patiently.
When you went to the Central West End, was it similar to what it is today? I wasn't in St. Louis then, so curious.
So when I was looking around the Central West End for the first store, Central West End was probably one of the hotter spot neighborhoods around that time. And when I actually opened up in '04, it was the hottest neighborhood, and I was on the hottest corner in terms of not just dining, but there was nightlife, shopping. We felt mostly it was safe there. Parking kind of sucked, but it was a cool neighborhood, and you could sit outside on the patio and see some of the most amazing people walking around. It was great for networking, good to just hang out. You can go to one place and go to multiple different restaurants. Since COVID, it has changed a little bit, but still a cool neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Central West End, and you're prominently right on the corner, great signage, can't miss Drunken Fish there. With being in so many different types of locations, employing different types of people, how do you maintain consistency throughout your brands? Is it just the SOPs and stuff that you were referring to?
Yeah, I think it is tied to the infrastructure of your business, the SOPs, the training manuals, and all of that. But it really is about getting good people onto your team that believes in your vision, that can train down the processes and maintain consistencies in the operations on a local basis, And I think that's probably some of the hardest thing, in business. Anybody can write an SOP, but people have to, look at it, follow it, and train it down. And so, in any business, we're in the people business, And so that's probably the hardest thing for us, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Before we start to wrap up the show, I got to ask you about the coffee concept you're working on. Can you give us just like some insight into how that idea came about, when we can expect it to open?
So that concept came about during that conversation that I talked to you about, is if we were to reopen when the building had the collapse, if we were to maximize the utilization of the spaces in my building, what would be great for the neighborhood? So we took it on the approach of what would be great for the neighborhood and what brands would add value into the neighborhood. And so fast casual, we didn't have a coffee brand at the time. And so coffee came about that conversation. And so we got all the plans ready to go. We were actually about to go into construction in the first quarter of 2021. That's when COVID hit. And so now we've been waiting patiently, and I think we're ready to go this year, actually. So that's how it came about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. Last question before we go into the final segment of the show. How do you think about build-outs? Because you've done, obviously, a number of them in your career. Is there any high-level tip or anything that people should look out for if they're doing their own build-out? Is it, you want to make sure that you have a certain amount of square footage for folks to sit or not sit? If it's a fast casual concept, let's say.
So my first recommendation, if you're going into hospitality businesses, get a second generation space, as opposed to building ground up. You're going to spend a lot more money building your own place, unless it's your own building. There's enough places that go out of business. Take a second generation space and modify it for your brand or your ideas. I think that's probably the most cost-effective way to get into your own space without having all of the infrastructural costs that are tied to a first generation space.
That's a great tip, and I think just using my or wearing my real estate cap, that makes the most sense to me as well. If I were to be opening a restaurant
Yeah.
or something along
Or
those
anything,
lines,
yeah.
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 We like to end the show with what we call a hole in one. That's pretty much just your greatest piece of advice that you can give someone that they can either implement in their life or business today. So I know that's a big question, but take your time and give us what you got.
You know what? I think what I've learned in the many years I've been in business is treat people fairly, no matter where they came from. And I kind of got this from, both of my mom and dad were janitors at a high school. And so it's not like I came from money. I had to work my way into doing what I'm doing today. And so I always tell people, hey, you got to treat your dishwasher the same as anybody else. And it doesn't matter if this person comes in sweatpants or comes in a suit, treat people fairly. When I say treat people fairly, treat your customers fairly, treat your employees fairly, and have respect for people at all times.
I love it. I try to live my life that way, but hearing it come from you, it's definitely something that I'll try to keep top of mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're super busy, you may forget that
Yep.
that's the most important piece right there. Where can folks learn more about you, your company, or maybe reach out to you if they feel inclined to do so?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you want to know anything about our restaurants, you go to their individual websites. Drunken Fish is drunkenfish.com. Kimchi Guys is kimchiguys.com. And our event space is 612north.com. We're actually celebrating our 20 years of Drunken Fish
Congratulations.
here in the metro area. And this Friday, we're selling tickets for a huge party at the event space on February 9th. And so we're celebrating 20 years of Drunken Fish and Lunar New Year kind of combined together this Friday. So we're excited about that. But if you want to get hold of me, I'm usually downtown somewhere in my building running around at the landing.
Awesome. We'll link all of that. The episode may not be out in time for February 9th, but I'll try to push it up and make it a priority.
Sure.
Thanks for your time, Munsok. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here, and I had a great time talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. When you say within half a year you had a successful business, so within half a year you were profitable?
Yeah. I remember the rent. The rent was $17.50 a month. And so most of the business in nightclubs or bars really is your staff and the rent, and then obviously the expenses of the liquor. And we didn't serve any food. And so it was so if you had one good night, you were paying for the rent, and so it was a good. So the thing about nightclubs or bar businesses is that if you get people there, it's a very profitable business. It's when you can really struggle hard when you can't get the people there. So but that's probably any business. I always tell people, like, when you have to do something and you want to do something, you have to be resourceful and figure things out, because no one's going to tell you that there's some recipe to be able to be a good entrepreneur or be successful in life. And so I know more of that now, being in the game for such a long time. But at the time, it was just all about I can outwork anybody, if I have to wake up at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning or whatever the time frame to be able to get stuff done. It was just my mentality, and we're just grinding it out. And so I think one of the main things about entrepreneurship is, can you outwork anybody else? And do you have the discipline to be able to outwork anybody else? And are you willing and able to figure out problems and come to real solutions? And are you be able to do that with a group of people that you're going to be able to surround yourself with? And I think those are the most important skill sets that at the time, you don't know you're building and learning these things, but in retrospect, yeah, those are things that I think are remedies, are tools to help you become more successful. I think there's a time period where, I call it neck up or neck down work. And
Okay.
so, I don't think you know any better when you're in your 20s and you're just working hard, you're just working with your body to make everything happen. Somewhere down the line, you start to go, you know what? I need to start using more neck up work and utilizing how to be more strategic and tactful in your strategies so that you're not doing a lot of neck down work. And so I think in the first year, because I was in my restaurant, making schedules, ordering products, putting new menus up, training people. Sometimes I might have to wash the dishes. So you're doing all of these things, and yet you realize, hey, I'm only one person. How do I mitigate some of these duties and start delegating things down so that I can do more higher up work? And so I think within the first 6 months of the business, I started realizing, hey, I need to start training some of these processes down, and so that I can work on things that I think are more important to building business. And I think once you realize that work is very, very important, I started putting some systems in. So I started working. So I would work a full day at the restaurant. I would come home and start writing protocols, SOPs, training manuals, handbooks. And so that took several years to set up, actually. And so I always tell people, like younger entrepreneurs, when they ask me questions about certain things, I go, anybody can run a good business, but do you want to run that business 20 years from now doing exactly the same thing? Or do you want to be able to scale or have an opportunity to scale and work on different things and delegate those kind of responsibilities down? Because if you're in the business, then you're really not an entrepreneur. I always, I had a young friend of mine that got into business, and I said, don't scale your business unless you're fully out of your own for your first business, because it's really, really hard to expand. Because then if something happens in your first business and you get to your second business, now you got to be traveling, back and forth, putting out fires. Right. Yeah.
In the beginning, you're doing it all. Now you have a team. You're instilling the culture you want in the team. But with such a large team, what does your day to day look like? Because you just mentioned you're reworking the menu. Are you personally working on that? Are you trying to delegate to team members, or what does your day to day in the business look
So
like?
right now, for myself, I'm never in the stores as much as I used to be. I was pretty much living in the stores when I first started. So we have a corporate team of probably about 12, 13 people, full-timers that from accounting to marketing to culinary. We have a wide range of people that some of them has come up the ranks, and they have obviously different responsibilities. But because one of the things that we're trying to get off the table in the first quarter of this year is the new menu, so we assembled a culinary team to be able to come up with new recipes. And so I'm heading that meeting. So I'm overseeing that culinary creative side. I'm also running the meetings for the district. And then everything else, when it comes to store meetings, marketing meetings, accounting things, it's all delegated down to the team members.
How do you think about build outs? Because you've done obviously a number of them in your career. Is there any high level like tip or anything that people should look out for if they're doing their own build out? Is it, you want to make sure that you have a certain amount of square footage for folks to sit or not sit? If it's a fast casual concept, let's say.
So my first recommendation, if you're going into hospitality businesses, get a second generation space. As opposed to building ground up, you're going to spend a lot more money building your own place, unless it's your own building. There's enough places that go out of business. Take a second generation space and modify it for your brand or your ideas. I think that's probably the most cost effective way to get into your own space without having all of the infrastructural costs that are tied to a first generation space.